best way to get started on this is to get you to introduce yourselves if you can. So we might go Brad first. Brad, could you tell us what your current role is and just go through a little bit of your background and how you arrived at your current role as well? So a bit of your coaching history.
Sure. So Brad Lawson, I'm the head strength coach with the San Francisco Giants in Major League Baseball. I guess, as most of us have started out, we grew up, playing sports, playing all types of sports, played some college baseball, shoulder injury, as many former players who didn't make it would probably say. But at that time, I really kind of started focusing on my studies. I did my kinesiology and education degrees, and it wasn't until probably my junior year in college when I kind of realized that I could make like strength conditioning, a career. So I started volunteering with one of my professors who was our head strength coach at the university of the men's hockey team there. So my roots started in hockey. Started volunteering there. I got on with a junior A hockey team my last couple years of university. And when I was finishing my degree, my love, my passion had always been in baseball. And through the NSCA, I guess I just got lucky. I got into baseball, got my foot in the door there with the Washington Nationals. And after that, a couple part-time roles, moved over to the Chicago Cubs for a couple of years, and then got hired on full-time with the Giants in 2012. And then, just kind of worked my way up the ranks. And last year is my first year as the head strength coach with our major league team.
Yeah, nice. So does that give you a full 12 months with Major League so far?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, nice.
Yeah. So, I guess I got the role. I was probably offered the position last November, I would say, November of 2018 now. Spent all last year with the Major League team, and then we were prepared to go into battle up till a few weeks ago when everything got shut down. So
why? What happened a few weeks ago?
I don't know. Somebody got a cold. Somebody, it got worse, and it just kind of spread all over the place. It kind of went wild, spread like wildfire.
Yeah, geez, it's been interesting. What about you, Saul? How did what's your story leading into this?
All right. So I actually got into college as a computer science major, man. So I went into the engineering department. At that time, I hated physics. I didn't enjoy physics, you know what I mean? And so that's why I kind of just switched role. It went from understanding the equation or coming up to the equation to then just kind of plug and chug once I switched to bio. And I've always been into working out, and just understanding how this actually helps me and what adaptations are actually occurring in my body when I'm working out. So I kind of wanted to find a mix of both exercising and biology because I had a love for both, right? So I ended up actually applying to the University of Miami, which had an exercise physiology program. So I went there for my master's. While I was at Miami, I interned with the football team for about 2 years, worked with Coach Swayze there, which was awesome, man. Kind of taught me more so about just getting the guys going and how to motivate the guys. And you basically the guys will do anything for you if they trust you and really believe in you and really know that you want the best for them, So he kind of just taught me just be you and just get their buy-in from just being you as a person, and then they'll actually do what you want them to do and what's beneficial for them. After I finished my after I finished my master's, I actually came back home to LA. I got a 6-month internship with the Olympic sports team at UCLA, all the Olympic sports. So I primarily worked with volleyball. So a lot of acceleration work, explosive work. After that, an opportunity arose with the Giants as their Arizona League strength coach. I did that for 2 to 3 months. And then during the off season, I actually got the opportunity to interview for the Latin American coordinator position. It was a brand new position that the Giants were opening up. And it was a new position that mostly all of baseball, or a couple teams in baseball, wanted to start up. So it's going to the DR, helping out some of the Latin players, Venezuelan players, Dominican players, and incorporating them or teaching them the foundations of lifting, strength and conditioning, and why it's important. I did that for, I believe, 3 years. And then in 2018, I ended up interviewing for the sports science position with the Giants. Interviewed for that and going along into my 3rd year. Well, until this whole pandemic happened. But now just kind of waiting it out and see what happens.
So before the COVID-19 stuff, or even now, what's your relationship between you at work? Like, where do you work together? How often? How does that work?
In terms of, well, I'm the sports scientist and assistant strength coach, so I work hand in hand with Brad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just trying to find ways to make the players more aware of what they're doing day to day. Taking care of the basics. I think we sometimes don't focus on what's the most important is a consistent lifting schedule, making sure their hydration, their nutrition is correct. So it's an involvement with both the trainers, the strength coach, and the nutritionist, and then even the sports site guy to kind of bring that all together.
Yeah. All right. Just because this is supposed to be about VBT, we should ask a velocity-based training type question. Something that I'm interested in. So, particularly in Australia, I can't speak for the US. You guys might have to tell me what it's like. But velocity-based training isn't necessarily part of the curriculum as you're developing as a coach. So you don't necessarily even hear about this concept until you're already coaching. So if that's reflective of what you've experienced, then it might not be. I'm just intrigued as to where you came across the concepts. How did you self-teach and develop and get to the point where you can implement this stuff with elite athletes?
Yeah. No, when I was going through, through my university career, I'd never heard of velocity-based training either. I guess with that said, if we're just monitoring velocity during lifts, and that's kind of the basis of the velocity-based training, I mean, inherently we've done it in the past, right? With plyometrics, weightlifting, lifts or Olympic weightlifting lifts, powerlifting type lifts, med ball work, stuff like that. Like, we've all varied velocity within our workouts. We just didn't really know that, or it wasn't coined that term yet. And then we didn't have the technology yet either, right? Like, to actually monitor the bar speed, or I'm assuming tendos were out at that point, but they weren't as accessible to strength coaches. So it wasn't a part of my curriculum, of my formal education either. It was something that, I don't know, I guess I came across it, probably 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. I didn't really know too much about it, but it definitely was something that intrigued me, more so from, the standpoint of being able to have something that'll help us increase our players' intent during training sessions, but then also in season try to help almost like auto-regulate those sessions, right? Baseball season's pretty long. It's unlike any other sport. No other sport plays a game every single day like we do.
Yeah.
But we know we can't just get away from training, right? Otherwise, those physical characteristics that we have built up all off season will go to shit. So we can't just stop training. But how do we do that in a smart way that optimizes their performance every night that the lights come on at 7:00, and keep them ready to go? And those are probably two of the things that intrigued me the most about it, was increasing our players' intent during training and then being able to auto-regulate each session. I guess in terms of educating myself, it was really reading and listening to everything that I could get my hands on, right? Like any sort of, peer-reviewed research, anything online, any sort of manuals that I could get my hands on, any sort of podcast that I could listen to, anything like that. And obviously, when you start talking about that, guys like Brian Mann come up, and Dan Baker, and even Eric Mahone, who's used to be with the Texas Rangers. He's now over at the NSCA.
Yeah.
He did a presentation a couple years ago, I think it was now, on some case studies that they did while using some GymAware units. And on top of all that, I'm really lucky because of the staff of strength coaches that I have around me. A lot of guys are really smart. A lot of them are smarter than I am, but they all love learning new things and discussing these topics and stuff like that. So really, it was a lot of self-education, but then just having that group of strength coaches around me that we could all kind of collaborate and talk about it and learn more about it, and then find practical ways to implement it with our guys in season, off season, that sort of thing. I think at this point we have something like probably 20 units. Yeah. So I'm hoping that we're up there and we're a power user with you guys at this point. But yeah, we've invested a lot into it, and we've been lucky that way. But it's been a lot of self-education and a lot of discussions with some really smart strength coaches around us, as well as some other strength coaches out in the field as well. Just learning anywhere and everywhere that we can.
So that just I just thought of a quick question. If someone's watching this and it's the 10th time they've listened to something on velocity-based training, and they're thinking, yeah, now's the time I need to actually get serious about learning and implementing, do you have a suggestion for where they should start?
In terms of starting to implement with it?
Yeah, like a resource or something they should do in their own training, or where do they go from here? So they've heard about this, they've been listening, they've listened to all the easily accessible podcasts or webinars that are available. It's time to get serious. What do they do next?
I'm assuming that they have, some sort of device, whether it's a GymAware or it's Tendo units available to them. I think the first thing that, yeah, I think the first thing you've got to do as a coach, you've got to get comfortable with, the software and the operation of it. You've got to mess around with it in your workouts. You got to know what it feels like. You can't ask a player to go and do a workout with certain expectations without knowing how that's going to impact that player. No matter how much literature you've read, no matter how many podcasts you've listened to, you don't know until you actually do it. You've got to walk in their shoes before you ask them to do it. So I think just playing around with it, getting comfortable with the software, knowing what the workouts are going to feel like if you're asking guys to do, certain reps, certain sets at certain speeds, like all of that. You just need to be comfortable with it. You need to mess around with it. You need to know what you're doing before you ask them to do it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I think like my point for that would be try to see where your speed's at. You know what I mean? Throw on 135, 185, 225 and see what speed you actually hit. And if that speed aligns with what you really think you're at, if you think that's a strength zone for you, try to test it. You know what I mean? Is that a speed strength? Is that accelerated strength, absolute strength? Like until you try it and you actually see the numbers, you don't really know. So It's a good way for you to kind of like play with it, and then once you know where you're at, then you can make an adjustment off of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I will say this: you don't have to try everything, because there was one thing that I did hear Brian Mann say in one of his podcasts about it. He's like, don't use front squats on a speed day. Like that bar will come up and it'll hit you in the chin pretty good. So that's the one thing that I haven't tried yet. Not sure if I will, but probably not.
Yeah.
If you do, you've got to film it and get it on Instagram.
Be a nice fail, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
So, I think
I was just going to say, Will, like, I think what Saul said is really important. Like, obviously, trying it on yourself first, experimenting with yourself, seeing where you're at, and then you can sort of apply it to your players. And I think that's what we've seen the good coaches sort of do, and that's why they're so successful, is because they sort of try it on themselves before they implement it. And yeah.
Oh, 100%. And I think from where we sit, so we talk to a lot of coaches from a lot of different sports. And I think you can tell the difference between someone that's trained. You can hear it in the language that they use and the way they describe velocity-based training, if they've just read the textbooks compared to if they've actually gone through a few cycles on their own and they're using this stuff. And also you can tell the difference, and that's not to be derogatory at all. It's just people have to do what they've got to do. But we can tell the difference between a coach that has used the software for themselves and is just trying to pick it up and run with it straight into a team setting, in terms of how they understand the product and what they know about it and how familiar they are with it. So it's pretty obvious, I think, when they're not.
Yeah, and I guess that's why, like, in the office, we, myself and Will, we work on a lot of the development sort of side. That's why we use the stuff, we live with the stuff and actually use it so we can understand what the coaches go through, what the athletes go through when they're using the system.
Yeah. I'll just move it along a little bit. We were it's still in the same vein though. I've just got to note that my internet connection is unstable. Am I still with you?
Yeah, you're still good.
Yeah. All right. What about the players then? So you've got to sort of self-educate. You've got to still read the textbooks, watch the webinars, and get practical with it for yourself before you start implementing with players. But what about when you first get players in who aren't familiar with these concepts? Do you spend any time educating them? Would you just give them instructions and do they have to follow along? Or do you find that the players that you're working with have some exposure to velocity-based style training concepts already?
Yeah, so I mean, we first started implementing velocity-based training last season, 2019 season. It was a new concept to a lot of our guys. Some of them were familiar with it, had heard of it, had seen it, that sort of thing. Personally, I believe it's extremely important to educate our players. Just from creating a buy-in standpoint, right? Like, if guys are going to use it, we want them to use it the way that we're asking them to use it. These guys are grown men, right? Like, they're gonna make their own decisions, and unless they understand how it's going to benefit them on the field, like, I can't really do anything to make them use it if they don't want to. So the best way to get them to use it and to do the things that we're asking is to give them a good reason why I'm asking to do it and how it's going to help them on the field, right? If it's simply increasing the intent during their training, if it's holding them accountable to be training at the weights, at the velocities that they need to be at to address the goal that we're trying to achieve within that training session or that training block, like, that's really important. And it's also from, like I said earlier, like the auto regulation standpoint. There could be one day where they're back squatting 315 and they're in a strength zone, and that's great. But maybe we just played 18 innings a couple days ago and they haven't fully recovered, or they had a fun night out or something like that. And if they're not hitting the velocities they need to hit, we cut the weight. If on the flip side, if they're doing really well and they're having like a really strong day and we need to bump them up in weight, then let's bump them up in weight. Let's not waste that training session training in a zone directed at a different goal from what our intention was. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it does. So do you get all the guys together and hold seminars or workshops, or do you just get them going in the gym and they just learn as they go? How do you teach them? How do you describe this stuff to them?
Yeah, so a lot of new, ideas, that we're going to implement in the upcoming season, we use during smaller training camps in the off season to help introduce some players, so it's not a huge rush of, trying to educate, everybody on the same thing. Personally, we don't do a lot of like seminars for our players to update them on why we're going to use velocity-based training. We prefer to be much more kind of intimate with them and personal with them. So it's more of a personal conversation, especially that way. If they have a question, then it's something that like we can answer right then and there. And we have that conversation off to the side. It's a little bit more of an intimate, personal conversation about why we're asking to do it, how it's going to benefit them. And then obviously getting any sort of feedback from them, any sort of concerns they may have, those sorts of things.
So I know you, Saul, would be pretty familiar with velocity-based training concepts. What about the rest of the coaching staff?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
How's the rest of the coaching staff with velocity-based training concepts? You've sort of, earlier on, we referenced that you've all sort of got to be on board, working together to try and get buy-in from the players, keep them moving along. When it comes to these sort of conversations, like one-on-one type conversations about what they're going to be doing in the gym, how do you find the whole coaching staff is with their understanding of velocity-based training?
With the coaching staff, I'm assuming you're talking to like about field staff, like hitting coaches, pitching coaches, that sort of thing. Yeah. So couple of good examples that I have with that. There's some other technologies that guys will use with their bats to get, rotational acceleration and bat speeds and things of that nature. And we've had some pretty good discussions using those other technologies that monitor bat speed and that sort of thing around bat speed programs, trying to increase a player's bat speed. And we've actually have used some of the velocity-based principles in these bat speed programs. So they see that it's not just a weight room, activity, but it's like, hey, we have a speed day today, or during this set, this is a speed set, or this is an overload set. Like, I've kind of related it to hitting coaches. Like, if we're going to go, on a strength block during the off season, what do you guys think of swinging a bat that's 2 ounces heavier than their game bat all month long during that block, and really working on overload and strength. And if we go into a power phase where we're using potentiation, how about we go with a heavy bat into our game bat, and we kind of potentiate those game bat swings? Like, we've tried to collaborate, and we're lucky because our field staff is very progressive, and they're very open to new ideas. So we've had some conversations about velocity-based training that has nothing to do with the weight room with them. So just trying to just pull like that, just little bit of extra, performance in different areas, just based off some basic training principles, and then with more of a geared more towards kind of velocity-based training. So it's been interesting, and our staff has been great.
Yeah, I think we were sort of touching on the point of, like, when you get the numbers, like, sort of how do you display those numbers to, let's say like a senior coach, or maybe Saul, you can sort of touch on that, like, because you're the analytics guy. Do you feed reports back to them, or like what's sort of the conversation you have with them?
Well, at the moment, we actually don't share most of that data because just in terms of the privacy for the players, if the player is willing to, then we would. Yeah. But we kind of, Brad and I more so use it as a progression. Like, are they being more powerful with the same weight? Are they less? Like, you know what I mean? We kind of just keep it within like the medical staff itself. At this moment, we don't really share it too much. Maybe Brad can elaborate a little bit more on how he probably goes about it. But at the moment, we really don't share it too much.
Okay.
Yeah, at the moment right now. So if you guys aren't aware, then there is a players union policy that allows the players to choose, any sort of sports science information, who gets to see that information and who can't. They have every right to choose whether they want to use it or not. Something like GymAware, we don't necessarily classify so much into that sports science realm as much as it is, it's another tool for ensuring proper training during our sessions. It's not something that we necessarily share with the coaching staff a lot, or front office or anything like that. They haven't really expressed too much interest in seeing what a guy's velocity was that day on his back squat or anything like that. It's more for ensuring the quality of the training And then we'll talk with the players about that and watch, drop off during sets, or, give them the ranges that we want them to be in, and why we want them to be there, and what the goal for that day is, and that sort of thing. So it's more in the moment. There hasn't been a whole lot of, generation of reports like on the back end or anything like that. So
just an aside question: do you find that the players bring velocity based concepts into the rest of their training in the gym, at least, or as soon as you get a GymAware off the bar, like if they're doing something without a GymAware, do they just revert to old standard patterns of lifting? So, particularly in terms of lifting with maximal intent to move fast, right? So if you take a GymAware off the bar, do they just slow down straight away? Or do you find that it sticks and they train themselves into it and keep training that way, even when they don't have a device attached?
I haven't, honestly, I haven't seen it a whole lot because we're pretty consistent with our usage of it.
Yeah.
I would think that probably with the higher velocity zones, some of even starting at the strength, speed strength, those zones, guys probably would resort back to their normal tempo, if you will, of the lift. I think that's honestly like one of the biggest benefits for the training session with the player is the instant feedback that they get from the device. If we have a goal of working that, strength speed zone, like those guys they're working to get into that zone. And if they're way above it, we're like, all right, like you're just way too strong for this, throw some more weight on. And we put some more on, and we tell them like that's how we're going to regulate where you're going to be at. If you're too fast, add more weight. If you're too slow, take some off, because the goal today is X. So we need to make sure we have the right load. And this is simply going to tell you if you're working at that right velocity or not. And
Yeah.
that's where for our players, it's really beneficial and keeps the intent of every rep like there where we want it to be.
Yeah, and I guess first to that, what are your most used features of GymAware? So what are you favoring most of the time? Could you describe your setup and what's pretty common for you guys to have running on the GymAware system on a rack or a rig?
What zones do we use the most?
Literally, what features in the app are you setting up?
So I guess we're probably just running it from like a general standpoint most of the time.
Yeah.
Depending on the phase or the block that we're in, we have our goals set for the zone. But the feature that I really like is the cluster set feature. Being able to put that on and let that run, especially our guys that are a little bit older and more in tune with training, like they take it a little bit more seriously and they're focused during their sessions. Some of our more well-trained athletes I've used that with a lot of success. And just the whole setup, like giving them the countdown, giving them the instant feedback after every rep, the timer, like when I tell them they're supposed to take X amount of time between their clusters, then they just having those timers, it just has all the features on there that you need. Not that I would just walk away from a guy, but you could literally just set him up and let him go, and it has all the information there that he needs. And after a few sessions working with a guy, like they know how to get everything set up. They know how to pull up their profile. They know how to make sure their zones are set appropriately, like all of that. So it's just very user friendly once you know how to use it as a coach, and it's very easy to learn as a coach. And there's one of our other coaches, it was our AAA strength coach, I think, that showed me the cluster set feature. I didn't even know it was there, and I'm just like, this is gold. And I loved it. So, but that's for me, like that's probably like one of those features that not everyone's going to realize right away is there. But it's even just all the little features like the ding, like ring the bell, like that instant feedback. It's the timer on there since their last set ended. It's the feedback that they're in the zone, like how fast was that? How much power output did I have? Like it just has everything there.
Yeah, awesome. So what about you? Do you use a different set of features? Do you use any of the reporting features or?
Last spring training, what we were doing was like the competitive, like there's one page on your guys' website where you can show like 5 or 10 different players and what their peak power, their mean velocity for the lift. We would post that up on the television as competition so that each rep was with intent. Yeah, the leaderboard's on there. And some players liked them, some players didn't. You know what I mean? For those players that didn't like them, it's because they weren't moving the bar as fast as you really thought they were. You know what I mean? So it kind of tells you, hey, well, you're not moving as fast. It's probably need to train a little bit more. You know what I mean? So some guys like it, some guys don't. But I would think that's probably one of my favorite features on there. The way that we kind of had it set up this spring training was, I believe we had 5 units set up. I think it was like 3 for a trap bar, 1 for like split squat, and I think 1 for squat. And the cool feature on that was just the team settings. Like you can have literally 40 to 50 guys on there. You set up all your 50 guys. If 2 guys want to do trap bar, another guy wants to do a squat, another guy wants to do a split, and on their card, they know exactly which zone they're supposed to be in, and they know how to navigate through the app. It makes it real simple for them to go through it. You know what I mean? You can monitor 2 or 3 guys at a time, just kind of look from afar, focus on just correcting like their actual movement patterns and seeing the speed is there. So it's from that ease. In terms of the actual website features or like all the analytics, I don't really focus on that too much because at the moment I'm just trying to focus on the speed. Are they meeting their mean velocity, and are they producing mean power at the weight that we want them to produce? You know what I mean? Because some guys will be like, well, I'm not lifting enough weight. Like I need to go up in weight because compared to this guy, like he's lifting 50 pounds, 60 pounds more. And I was like, all right, yeah, but you're lifting at the same speed, or you're actually lifting at a higher speed. So you might actually be producing way more power. So then you kind of compare both of them and be like, you know what, this is the right zone for you, because if you go higher in weight, your power production actually goes down. So this is best for you. So that's probably one of my favorite features on there.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I was just going to say on that, like, you know, a lot of people think about sports tech and they go, oh, you know, it's hard to set up. It might interfere with my session. But I'll just say, like, my favorite feature, I kind of call it like GymAware hands-free. And that's kind of like a combination of like 5 features. So, you know, you can have GymAware running in the background, recording like you guys are probably aware of. And the athletes don't actually need to interact with the system and change their profiles, change the weight. Like, you know, you can set up the short listing, have auto record on, you know, set up the bar weight follows athlete and auto skip, and it's just going to cycle through, you know, 4 or 5 guys. And I think that's really valuable in terms of like coaching and not distracting from what you guys are trying to do. Just, yeah, so that's kind of what I like anyway. Will?
Oh, mine. I'm just a sucker for the ding. Like, I can be, you know, I've got a 2-year-old working, getting pretty tired. I don't have as much zip as I used to, but if I've got the iPad up there and I can you just feel it. You can't help it. You know, you've set a zone and you just do everything you can to try and hit your zone, even at my level of training. So the power of that immediate feedback is undeniable, I think. You just have to see it and hear it, and you just, you know, you can't help yourself.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. Like I'll go around, like I might have a coach that's working with a guy in a squat rack, and I might just walk by and just yell at him just to ring the bell. It's like I love hearing that sound. I just love knowing that guys are getting the work in that we have planned out for them, that they're hitting the zones that they need to hit so that we can get those adaptations that we're looking for. And you know, it's funny because like Saul was alluding to, like some of the guys get really frustrated. Like they want to, like they want that. It's almost as addictive as, you know, that stupid ding that your phone gives every time you get a text message. And, you know, especially if it's a large group text message or something like that, and there's like 100 messages coming through, but it's like you just want to hear that ding, right? Like you're just fighting with every ounce of yourself to get where you need to be. And then on Jay's point, I don't know if it's the free run option that he was talking about, but we've used that in the past as well, because as committed as I am to the velocity based training and using the GymAwares and trying to use it on every rep of every set of every exercise that we do, we do buy some more lower body stuff with the GymAwares, but I don't want it to become a distraction either.
Yeah.
Right. Like if there's something happening where the iPad hasn't been updated and it's running slow, or, anything like that, I'm just gonna be like, you know what? We're not using it. Just get your work done. Like this is what we're shooting for. This is the goal today. Let's get your work done, because the last thing that I want is a piece of technology in the weight room that's keeping guys from training.
Yeah.
Luckily, we haven't had any issues with GymAware other than, maybe an iPad freezing up or something like that. But usually it runs, as long as our iPads are up to date, in terms of the software that they're running, everything is run ridiculously smooth. So that's been great. Kudos to you guys on that end of things, because we literally haven't had any glitches.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Well, we're the guys, you can tell if there are, but there aren't any. We actually had, Jay went out and got some questions off social media from fans that we might run through in a second, but we had another question I thought would be really interesting, and you might be limited in how you answer it because it is about, what your athletes are actually doing. But we were sort of thinking, is there an exercise or a few exercises where you could describe the sorts of speeds and power you guys are getting in general? So like on a back squat, maybe how fast and how heavy are they lifting? We don't have to get specific, but I just thought it'd be interesting for maybe the coaches out there for amateur teams, or even amateur baseballers themselves, just to know roughly, like, what should they aim for, say on a, whatever it is, a dead or a squat. I don't know if you do any cleans or anything, but do you have any examples?
I don't have any specific examples off the top of my head. But just kind of thinking about it, off the cuff, it's our speeds and weights are really going to be all over the board, right? Like we have some guys that weigh 150 pounds. We have some guys that weigh 250 pounds, and everywhere in between, right? So like, if we're looking at peak power output and, mean velocities and stuff like that, like depending on the lift and stuff like that, like guys are going to be all over the board. Like I really don't know that I can say, you should be looking for this speed at this weight on this exercise. But I do think that, the two biggest things that we've looked at have been, mean velocity on our basic strength lifts, and making sure that they're in the zones that we're trying to target, whether it's, a max strength, accelerated strength, strength speed, speed strength, like whatever the case may be. Make sure the guys are in those zones with the weights that they're using. When it gets too fast, put more weight on. If they start out and it's too slow, take some weight off. It's really, I don't want to downplay, but it really is that simplistic, and this device makes it that easy to really know. But we will look at, we don't use traditional Olympic lifts, at least not the majority of our guys. We do have a couple that do, but pretty much everybody, we do some kind of derivatives, if you will, but we'll do like a trap bar squat jump, right? Like to kind of almost take place of our cleans, and we'll do it at varying weights. So we'll see different speeds. We can get some kind of profiling on the guys that way. But that's something that we've started diving a little bit more into this year, before that whole COVID thing happened.
Oh, sorry, Brad, you finish up.
Yeah, and I guess probably the last thing, like, so we're doing some weightlifting derivatives, if you will. We're with the GymAware and baseball players in general. We put a lot of emphasis on the lower body lifts with it, not so much the upper body. But bilateral, unilateral exercise, we'll squat, we'll deadlift, we'll do lunges, we'll do step ups, rear foot elevated split squats, like you name it, like we'll have it on there. I guess one of the things that I started kind of playing around with this spring And I haven't read any research on this, but it's just kind of a little bit maybe intuitive, I guess, of just what I was thinking is with the unilateral compared to the bilateral exercises, if we're looking for more power output, right? Like on a trap bar, on a back squat, if we're training for strength speed, we're looking to maximize power output. With our unilateral exercises, like a split squat or rear foot elevated, should they be in the same zone? Or being on single leg, should we drop them down a zone? Because you can't produce the same amount of force off of one foot as you can off of two, right? Like you just can't produce the force that quickly. The rate of force development is going to be lower unilaterally compared to bilaterally. So at this point, I'd like to throw this little plug in there that I'd love to sit down and have a beer with Brian Mann at some point, maybe if we go to Miami or whatever the case may be, to discuss that topic a little bit more if he's out there listening. But you know what I mean? Like, and that's something that I think it was some reading or a presentation that I saw.
I'm taking notes.
Cam Josie, I think is how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
And that was just something that he spoke about or presented on at one point. And for whatever reason, I had that thought, and I'm just like, wonder if, if we're looking for power output here, in this block, if we really on the unilateral stuff, if we should be training in that accelerative strength as opposed to the strength speed zone. I don't know what the answer is, but something that I have some interest in. So if anybody has some information on that, I'd love it.
Cool. Well, yeah, you've answered my first question. The first question was for or against Olympic lifts, but you guys just said, you kind of use the trap bar, counter movement jumps and squat jumps to sort of counteract those. Do you reckon you would ever sort of use Olympic lifts as part of your training? You said you might start to experiment a little bit more. Like what sort of exercises?
Yeah, I mean, if we have a guy with, a good training age experience, like we'll get guys from 4-year schools that have, come in and they have, 2-3 years of training where maybe they've done a lot of Olympic lifts. But then we also have a lot of guys from, Dominican or Venezuela or Nicaragua or wherever that may not have much experience in a weight room at all. And then we're dealing with players in extremely high numbers in a lot of times some pretty close quarters with the weight room. So it's very challenging in professional baseball to really take the time that is needed to teach the Olympic lifts, like in detail. Plus there's a lot of guys that have some limitations that it's probably not going to be the best idea. So we've kind of resorted to, that kind of easy out of, all right, well, trap bar squat jumps, you're getting the triple extension, you can work at the higher velocities with a decent load. We can probably get the same bang for our buck with that, with less teaching time. It's probably a little bit safer for them. But on the flip side, I have a couple of guys that one is young, one is old, that love doing cleans and they look really good doing cleans. Their movement patterns are very clean. We're not trying to max them out. Like we're not training for an Olympic weightlifting competition, but these guys get after it pretty good and have some clean technique and move some decent weight and can produce some pretty good forces with it. So yeah, we go with it.
Yeah, cool.
But I don't have any hesitations against using them. It's just finding the right time and place and obviously, athlete to use them with. Definitely.
Yeah, well, I guess one question that I really wanted to know was like, maybe Saul, you might have some more insight on this, but like has VBT translated into measurable results that translate over to baseball? So do you see guys running faster, hitting faster, those sort of things? Like what's sort of been your experience with that?
I mean, at this moment, we can't really translate like their numbers going up on VBT to like on-field performance because there's so many variables that can take play, right? Yeah. But what we can do is their fatigue level and how they feel day to day. You know what I mean? Like, if one day they're not feeling too well, but they still want to get a little bit after it, then you lower the weight and increase the speed on it, right? So it allows you to make day-to-day adjustments. And it's really difficult to like correlate, okay, well, your power production's gone up on VBT, so therefore your velocity on the field, or like your fastball went up as well. Like, we don't know. Like, there's so many other measurables to look at, you know what I mean? Like, let's say range of motion, or is this core strength? Like, there's just so many other things to look at that it's hard to make a concrete like answer for that.
Yeah.
Do you reckon overall your training volume in the gym has gone up or down after introducing VBT? Do you reckon you have an idea? There was some pretty cool researchers coming out comparing VBT to percentage-based training, and one of the parts of the finding is that you can get away with doing less work because you're getting rid of sort of junk training or training that isn't leading towards the adaptations you're after. So just wondering if that's translating into something you're seeing in real life.
Yeah, since the introduction of VBT, last year was the first year that we had introduced it. It was also my first year with our major league team. But I mean, I can't say for sure. I think our volume has stayed pretty much the same.
Yeah.
And it varies throughout the season. But in terms of the phases and stuff like that, it might be down a little bit lower this year potentially, but not due to using VBT. It was some other thought processes and stuff like that were kind of put forth, but just trying to trim a little bit of the fat, if you will, while keeping the intent high and really, dialing in on specific training sessions and adaptations that we're looking for, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then to go on Jay's previous question there about the transfer of training, that's something, I think we don't have enough paired data to really speak to at this point either. And like Saul said, like it's really noisy to be like, all right, this guy's back squat went up in the weight room, and we see that his exit velocity has also increased. It's great that his exit velocity has increased, but there's also a million factors that could be involved with that from a technical, a tactical, a physical standpoint. It could be better contact on the bat, right? Like maybe he's on fire and he's on a hitting streak, and he's just seeing like every pitch looks like a beach ball coming in. He's just crushing it, and he's not necessarily bat speed has gone up or anything like that. It's just the contact is better. So that there's a lot of noise, to try to make relationships from the weight room to a baseball field. But what we do know is through years of research that increases in lower body strength do increase sprint capabilities, jumping capabilities, all those things. So even though I can't definitively prove, even if there is enough paired data to try to make that assumption, even if I can't definitively prove that, yes, this, increase in back squat or lower body strength or whatever the case may be, or peak power output has led to increased exit velocities off the bat or pitch speeds or something like that. I know that through the years of research, just the general athleticism has improved, and that will be the foundation or the underpinning for all these other skill specific things that the guys are required to do, the things that guys are really paid to do, right? So I know that there's a relationship there, but it's very, very hard in baseball specifically to prove that.
Yeah, well, I guess with the do you guys sort of have like I see it personally in a lot of teams. I'm wondering if you guys sort of have it a specific like standardized weight that you kind of go back and test? So like, let's say 225 pounds back squat. Do you sort of go back to that weight and then see what they're lifting at so you can compare it to see if they go up? Like, do you sort of do those things, or do you rely on the zones or anything? Yeah, how do you sort of, you know what I mean?
That's one thing that we started doing this year.
Yeah.
But we were using the trap bar squat jumps, varying loads based off some previous research and trying to get some force velocity profiling on the guys so that we know what the guys excel at and where their areas for improvement lie, so that we can address those areas that need to be improved without losing the characteristics that they're really good at, because that's might be part of what makes them really special. So we have started doing that. Again, we don't have enough information at this point in time to really make any assumptions, but yeah, we have started digging into that more with our trap bar squat jumps.
I know last year with one of our starting pitchers, whenever he would squat, we would always keep him at like 225 or something like that throughout his starts, and just kind of I don't really remember the speed at which it was, but we would do that every like for basically a starting routine, and then we kind of got a feel off of how he was. Like if it was way lower, then we lowered the weight. If it was way higher, then we'd increase it, but we probably only fluctuate the weight by maybe 10 to 20 pounds. You know what I mean? So we just kind of kept that consistent, because with him, he was the type of guy that would want to add a little bit more weight. So it kind of helped us keep him there without his knee actually kind of starting to hurt him. I think Brad knows what I'm talking about, but so it kind of helped us throughout the year to keep him in check, and for us to keep us in check as well, in terms of like us not keeping each other like reliable or like, you know what I mean, accountable for it. So I think it was helpful because it keeps him in the right zone, and then it lets us know how he's interacting day to day.
Yeah. With the zones, what sort of zones are we talking about? Like, are you looking at sort of like 10 and 20% drops, like in season generally? Because you obviously, like Brad, you were saying 162 games plus postseason. You want to make sure that your guys are staying fit all year round, as well as peaking at, you know, important games at important times. Yeah. So like, can you just touch upon that? Like, what sort of zones you generally tend to set?
Yeah, so we'll use a variety of periodization, and we'll typically be in our work in the accelerative strength zone up to the speed strength zone, and that's kind of the ranges that we stay in. Obviously, with our trap bar jumps, the lower weights, stuff like that, we can get up above there, but though that's basically the three zones that we live in during the season, and we don't use the GymAware necessarily a lot for assessment. We have some other tools that we use for monitoring players' lower body power output and that sort of thing. But I did notice last year, based off that testing, some of our guys that were the most consistent, had, you know, the best focus and intent during the workouts, saw extremely positive gains with their regular testing and monitoring throughout the course of a season. Because there's this whole I don't know what to call it necessarily, but there's this whole perception that, you know, the baseball season being so long that you just got to try to survive, right? And like, you know, a 10% drop off that's okay. Like, that's not too bad. But there's something in my gut that is always just really that didn't sit well with me, right? If you go through a 162 game and then you're going into playoffs, and that's the time of year at the end of a long season when you're expected to physically be at your best, there's something about that. It's just 10% that just doesn't sit well with me. And that actually led to a lot of changes within our training in a number of different areas. And we've seen some drastic improvements across the board with our guys, and being able to use different technologies that can kind of help monitor, the health and performance of our players over the course of a season, and seeing the guys, just anecdotally, the guys that really take care of themselves, the guys that really push themselves, can actually improve during the course of the season. Like that, to me, that's really motivating, knowing that, the periodization matters, the way that they focus in their workouts and stuff like that. Things like that matter. The way that they take care of themselves matter. And getting away from this whole survival mindset of surviving the season, as opposed to like, let's go out there and let's get after it and let's like really thrive and be at our best when it comes playoffs. 6 months later, that's not even including a 6-week training camp leading into the season. So 7 to 8 months later, like being at our best, playing every single day.
Yeah.
So
I can sort of draw a parallel there to cycling. So some of the pro cyclists, when they're first getting into the pro ranks, they might have to ride all season, like they're just racing all the time. And but even the top pros, the mentality there for a while has never been, if you managed well, it's never been just survive. It's let's be at our best at a certain point in the season, and we've got to race because it's our job. But there's no reason why we have to arrive at the end of the year destroyed. We can be peaking for a certain tour and come in really hot. So I guess it's surprising that that's not more prevalent in baseball already, because it's similar, right? You've got a lot of games, you've got to keep playing, it's your job, but there's no reason why you can't come out improved at certain points in a season if you managed well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think and correct me if I'm wrong, the difference with Major League Baseball, right? Like, we have a game every single night that matters, right? How many times at the end of the season in the past few years have we seen two teams tied after 162 games that have the exact same record, and they have to have a playoff game to get into the playoffs, right? And we were there a few years ago. It's like, I don't know that there's another sport. It's like, to try, because you can't just peak for a certain week. You can't just peak for a certain game, because every game matters. Yeah. Every game is important. If we don't win on, April 8th, that could be the difference between us making playoffs and not, right? Not a race next week or whatever the case may be. It's tough because, in the literature, like, you can't peak for an entire season, right? You can peak for a game, you can peak for a week, but you can't peak for 162 games, because that just leads to overtraining and less than desirable results. So it's really about, and I think, coming back to probably might have been one of your first couple of questions, like, that's one of the biggest things that drew me to GymAware, was the ability to auto-regulate, meet the player where they're at in their training session that day. It doesn't matter so much what the load on the bar is, just that you're getting into the zone that I need you to get into so that we can get that adaptations. If we need to take 20 pounds off, great. If we need to add 20 pounds, awesome. Let's do it. But just the ability to auto-regulate through a 162 game season is, for each individual player, is, on things that we can't actually see, how well recovered is their nervous system. Like, a lot of those things you can't see, or it's difficult to get guys to comply with, a certain technology that can give you that information, but then it's to make actionable plans off that information is very difficult. But then to have something where he's coming in for a training session today, I know that I can rely on this device to help me auto-regulate for where he's at today, whether it's, the beginning of our spring training, or if it's in April at the beginning of the season, or if it's in September and we're in the middle of a playoff race. So for me, that's where it brings a lot of value.
And how do you control for fatigue accumulation or volume in the gym? Are you setting sets and reps, or are you setting velocity cutoffs, like drop-off targets?
Yeah, so we'll have, well, I think it's a couple of things. It's a little bit of kind of the old school art of coaching, right? Like, knowing where these guys are at. And I think, we touched on it earlier, trying to trimming some of the fat so we can be more intentional with the stuff that we know is going to give us, the most bang for our buck. And we make those adjustments intuitively throughout the course of the season, on a day-to-day basis, but then also with our periodization later in the season. The last kind of half of the season is typically historically how it's been done in baseball a lot, and without losing sight of that, but then also incorporating those velocity cutoffs. How much wiggle room do we give them with their lifts? Like if we want them at so many meters per second, how low are we willing to let them go? I think that's probably one of the things that I liked about cluster sets with our, players that had, an older training age. We could use that. We could keep intensities high, which I think is very important all the way through the end of the season, keeping the intensity high, minimizing volume, giving the player the option of whether we go through one or two sets of clusters, depending on how he feels, where he's at psychologically that day, but being able to get some good quality work in, high intensity, hit the zones. We'll do similar things to help manage fatigue when we're looking for speed or power output on other machines that we use, some Kaiser machines that we use. We'll give them cutoffs. We just, we're going to do this exercise. You have this many reps. I want you to stay above, this percentage of peak power output. If you drop below for 2 reps, then that set's done, even if we're a couple reps short. So it's finding those little, those little, I guess, nuances with the programming to really give the players the information that they need of when they should cut a set off. Especially if they're starting to feel fatigued, or if it's been a long season, if it's a guy that plays every day compared to a guy that plays 2 or 3 times a week. So there's a lot of little nuances there, but yeah, we definitely use cutoffs with velocity during the training session. Sometimes we'll push them to different zones if necessary.
I think to Brad's point, you got to be able to make adjustments with the guy, like know your guy. Like throughout the season, of course, physical fatigue is going to happen, but a lot of the time I think it's mental fatigue with these guys. And knowing the guy and using GymAware to kind of dictate whether they should do it or not do it is super beneficial. You know what I mean? If there's a guy that's super intense, who's like, no, I know I'm dragging, but mentally I got to do it. I physically got to do it, because if I don't do it, then I won't feel good. Like, this is my routine. I got to do it. And then the numbers now where you want it, like, that's a good conversation starter with them. It's like, all right, cool. You got 1 set. We're supposed to do 3. Just get 1 more in, good intent, and then we'll back off. Because we're trying to give you a good workout, but also not fatigue you even more than what you already are. So it's a good way for you to have a conversation with them and educate them on why they should do it and shouldn't do it. I mean, it doesn't really leave like the guessing into play. Like, it's more of an accurate number.
Yeah, that's great. I'm out of questions. We've had you for a good hour.
Yeah.
So I'm just aware of the time. I don't know if Jay has any more thoughts or questions, or if you guys have any more thoughts you wanted to share or clarify anything that you felt needed a bit more detail.
Yeah.
I think it's a good. Sorry to.
No, we could talk all day, man. Go on.
I think it's a good tool to use when the guys first starting to lift, man. Like, I've noticed it a lot with like the Latin guys they really haven't done a lot of free weights, and it's a good way to correct their movement and show them how having proper movement pattern will actually increase the speed on the bar. Because a lot of the guys are used to just cable machines and things like that. So if you tell them, hey, like, you should push your hips back a little bit further on the squat, or maybe when you do a Riffalot elevated split squat, keep that knee straight down. Don't let it open up. Don't let it flare out. You know what I mean? And once they start making those adjustments and they see the difference in the speed, it's a good tool to use for someone who's starting up and you don't really know what weight to use with them, whether to use 135, 185, whatever it may be. It's a good assessment,
Yeah, totally. So Jay, did you have any
No,
Other
pretty much
things you
it.
want to
I
add?
mean, yeah, like I said, we can talk all day about this sort of stuff. I think should probably wrap it up though.
Yeah, I think so. Look, we're really appreciative of your time. So I don't think we can fully express the gratitude for you sharing your knowledge and these insights. We might have follow-up questions from people that watch this. If you don't mind, we can email them across or something if they're pretty good questions. But otherwise, just thanks again for taking the time to talk to us, answering our questions, putting up with Jay and I and our slow Australian internet connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us, guys. Just hope that this was beneficial for somebody out there, and they can take a little nugget away and go get some GymAwares and start using them.
Yeah, I think that's the takeaway for me. You just got to start using it. Like get stuck in.
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully, we'll be seeing you guys at the winter meetings if they're still on at the end of the year.
For sure.
Perfect.
For sure.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
thanks guys. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.